and a very exciting and interesting conversation, the so-called armchair conversation. I invite on stage Professor Stoddart, Professor Geim, Professor Wüthrich, and Donna Nelson. Please, Professor Donna Nelson, please on stage. He's moving there. No interrogation, it's just simple questions, not so scientific, just... Yes, they're coming. Microphones, please. So we're going to switch around. We don't have enough there, apparently. So the idea is we have 3 Nobel Prize winners and 1 almost a Nobel Prize winners. This is our VIP. The only women, actually, there are only 2 women that got honored by us in our history. That's bad. So this is privileged to be here, and I'm privileged to have her here. So the idea is, we're not speaking about science today after a buffet dinner. Just simple questions, interaction between science and life, and the tricky of being a Nobel Prize winners. What does it mean? First of all, to be a Nobel Prize winner, does it really need too much work? Or you could be a Nobel Prize winner even by chance. A big discovery can make you a Nobel Prize winner just by working in 1 week in your life. Who is going to start?
Well, okay. Well, I recently read a quote that my wife put to me of someone, I don't remember who it was, who said, I'm working 18 hours a day trying to beat those who are really ingenious.
So, can you be? The truth.
The truth. I think it is working, is it? You can hear
it's
me.
Working, it's working.
Yeah, look, it's a huge, big chance event. I think in chemistry, I could be out by a number or 2. Since 1901, there have been only about 176 people honored. And so it's a huge amount of luck involved in this. And an enormous number of people who have been very, very deserving have been overlooked. So we shouldn't just get carried away. Those of us who are called to Stockholm, it is one of those things that happens to you, and if it's out of the blue, as it was in my case, then it's a huge surprise. I'm actually quite glad it didn't happen until I was 74 years of age, because you end up leading the life of something like a royal family or a president, and that I was not prepared for. So I'm quite happy that it was held back for all the years that it was.
I know another number. Altogether there were 700 something, 10, now probably 20 Nobel laureates altogether. So it's not a very big number, and most of them dead, and the rest are nearly dying. And what I usually say about Nobel Prize is that people who won the Nobel Prizes are not geniuses. Sorry. Looking at all Nobel Prizes I know, at least in detail, it's time to come for a particular discovery. And technology, science behind are ready for this to happen. And then some people are quicker than others, slightly smarter, slightly quicker. The difference is not that much. It's like, Usain Bolt, who runs 100 meters in 8 something seconds, and most of us are just twice slower. So it's not a big difference. It's not like between leopard and a pig. So that's not the same difference. So we're just lucky being a little bit smarter and a little bit quicker, a little bit lucky, a little bit more serendipitous, but we're just bearers of those medals the humanity awards to themselves for particular progress in the human history. That's how I view it.
Well, I think that you are largely okay with the way you feel. But I think something that should be told this audience is that it is not those who contributed most to the development of a field. It is those that are first who are selected. An extreme case was in 2002 when I got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, and I got half of the prize, and the other half went to two colleagues, one of whose was Mr. Tanaka. Mr. Tanaka was 23 years old when he succeeded in getting macromolecules into the gas phase for mass spectroscopy. He had only a bachelor's degree and a very lowly job in his company. When he got the Nobel Prize, he was promoted 12 positions in one day. On the first interviews, he appeared in blue collar. The next day, he was in white collar. And he had a horrible time in Sweden because he was in no way used to the demands on us, let me say on us, and many others who are used to the circuit of giving lectures and so on. The other colleague who got the second quarter of the mass spectroscopy prize was 73 when he did his discovery and 86 when he got the prize. You see, there are amazing things, and the Swedes spend years and years and years to be absolutely sure to take out the one who has done it first and opened the field.
Donna, there are only 3 or 4 women that have won a Nobel Prize. What's going on? When are you going to get one?
I wish.
So how many hours a day you work?
Well, it varies depending on where I am. I mean, like here, not all that many, but back home, chemistry is my life. I mean, it's all I do. You know, whether it doesn't matter where I am, it's if I'm at school or if I'm at home, I've learned to be portable. But that's the way I want it. I'm one of those people that's very fortunate to really, really enjoy the profession I selected. And I would suspect that most of us up here are the same way. You know, it's my hobby as well as my work, and it's my life.
That's the best combination. So just change the gears. Getting Nobel Prize, I guess, is a novelty. Now, what's the resistance? Did people recognize immediately your invention or your discovery? What is the friction, what you experienced? So I guess everybody has his own story. But just, I don't know the details, but I say, what did you do to dispense all these, ideas that that's not true, that discovery is not worth it, or it's not correct. All this type of things that happen, everything that's new, always is difficult to be accepted. So, can you anybody tell short, in your career, what happened? Why they didn't believe you? I guess they didn't believe you.
I simply did something that was believed not to be possible.
Yeah.
Full stop.
And what?
But it took several years thereafter for people to realize it can be done.
So it needs several years to be proven.
I had to go skiing for 2 entire winters in order to get over all the flags that came at us for having cheated, not done it properly, copied from somewhere. And then I came back from skiing and things were all right.
Yeah, well, I experienced a little bit of a kickback going back to the 1980s when I was dreaming of making the mechanical bond, and this seemed to be an outrageous thing for the scientists to think about doing. And so we were successful, but then not everybody was prepared to accept that we had achieved our goal. And so it was a question of repeated over and over and over again. And since it often involved putting a number of rings together, we put 2 together, then 3, then 4, then 5, and we called 5 Olympiadine after the Olympic sign. And, eventually it, I think, was at least accepted, if only reluctantly, because there was always the question, what would it be good for? And the last comment I would make is quite often, if you're doing something that is different and creative, you run into quite a lot of opposition. And it's a very good sign when you detect that that opposition is coming your way, that you have critics, that you have people who are not accepting what you're doing and are not saying very pleasant things. Then you feel, yes, I've arrived, I've been successful.
That's a good thing.
I'd like to tell you a couple of stories about this, very short one.
Sure, okay.
When we published our first paper, no one believed this paper. It was in Science. It was rejected actually twice from Nature, but then appeared in Science. Nature referee said that it's not really interesting and doesn't present, quote, any breakthrough. After it was published in Science, at a conferences, I had 2 or 3 experiences when people came around and said, look, you should be really careful about this one. And they were my friends. And this was the time when Henrik Schön published infamously a lot of fake papers and there was kind of things, okay, people warned me that it's too good to be true, what I was talking at the conference. And it was for about a year. People didn't believe this. And then the tide completely changed. People there was a big group of people, 99%, who was just bluntly said, live long enough and you'll get the Nobel Prize. And there was a minority of people who were digging around and starting to say, all this has been done, maybe not exactly the same way, but in 1887 or something like that. So that allows to see, psychiatry of the human race. Okay, that was pleasant to observe all the time. So great view from this perspective. So in my case, I was lucky enough. Everyone have seen me as a front runner, so I was really relaxed. But there were 5 other people who were considered a contenders as well for the Nobel Prize after a few years, and there was not very nice stories how they argued between themselves, and it was a rat race between those people. Eventually, the second person was my former PhD student, postdoc at that time. So we were lucky, okay, but people got very gray, some people, during this 5 years rat race. Yeah.
Thank you. So just again, Donna, what's the history of when the other rejected your idea, the worst, and how you managed to get through?
Well, I think most of the projects that I've selected have involved that. But that concept of being told, like when I was first trying to figure out how to characterize, functionalize single-walled carbon nanotubes by using NMR, I first went down to the people at Rice University where Rick Smalley had been. And they told me, forget it, it can't be done. You're after the Holy Grail. You'll never be able to do it. You're wasting your time. And so I thought, I looked at what had been done, and people had failed. They were in mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. And I thought, but those people don't know how to run NMRs very well. And I'm an organic chemist. I can do this. And it did take us 2 years, but we were able to figure out how to do it. But there's another project that was a lot more dramatic, and that was on the Nelson Diversity Surveys, which I did not name. I am not that immodest. The National Science Foundation named them that. But those are surveys that document the lack of diversity among science faculty at research universities. And when we first came out with those data, inside the American Chemical Society, there was so many people protested and were upset by the results, which showed no Black assistant professors in the top 50 chemistry departments, no Native American assistant professors in the top 50 chemistry departments, etc. A lot of data like that. And they just didn't like hearing it. And so finally, the American Chemical Society contacted me and said, you're going to have to bring all of your papers, everything up to Washington, D.C., and present them to a committee. And so I did. And they scrutinized all of my papers and came back and said, okay, this is good. The data are good. And I said, okay, great. So I went home. I thought, I am really glad that was over, because it was very stressful. It was really stressful having to present that to a committee where half of the committee you could see they were really against me. And I thought, I am so glad that's over. And then 2 months later, the American Chemical Society contacted me again and said, well, that scrutiny was for the data on women. You're going to have to bring them again down to a place in Florida. And this time we're going to look at your data to look at underrepresented minorities. And so I had to do it again. I had to go through it again. And when, again, it was very stressful. And when I finally got through that, the American Chemical Society said, okay, this is ended. The data are good. There's going to be no more controversy about it. And it was stressful, like I said, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because after I went through that twice, there was no more controversy. It was over and the data were accepted.
Good. Switching gears again, what's the most difficult moment in your life, if you can say it, and what your suggestion to overcome difficulties?
I had two extremely difficult moments in my life. The first one was when I returned from a period of postdoctoral training in Canada to the University of Sheffield and found that the hierarchy, the four professors, were very much at war with each other. It was like living in baronial England. And the particular professor under whom I was delegated as an organic chemist made my life extremely difficult. Without going into a huge amount of detail, it is the reason that 8 years later I went on a secondment to Imperial Chemical Industries. And this is a good illustration of out of something that was really nasty and bad turned out to be something good, because this is where I found the building blocks, namely a weed killer, paraquat, and a few other things to build our molecular machinery. The second very difficult stage in life was when my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1992. Had a lumpectomy to be followed in 94 by a mastectomy, and we were in Birmingham in the UK. And I have to say that sadly at that time, Birmingham fell far short of being able to help my wife's deteriorating health situation. And so the lack of oncologists, the lack of being able to give treatment in the appropriate way obliged us to move to the United States. And for a period that was uplifting, because the attitude that we found when we went to UCLA was the UCLA Breast Cancer Center said, oh, we have 50 different ways of treating your chronic condition, and this was uplifting. In the event, she lived until 2004, and this was a miracle in itself. But I'm at pains to point out that for a third of our married life, we were fighting this insidious disease. I spent a huge amount of time in clinics and in hospitals, and it was a battle in survival. It was when I was able to, as it were, have two lives. I had my respite by going into the lab and working with my students to balance against the times when I was in clinics or in hospitals. Watching my wife, as it were, wither away at the hands, not just of the disease, but of the hard drugs and other parts of the treatment, the irradiation that effectively took her life. But it was a 12-year battle.
How you were able to overcome it? The most difficult moments. What's your advice? What did you do?
As I say, it was seeking refuge in my science and with my graduate students and postdocs. And, you know, they were immensely supportive, as were my colleagues at UCLA. They were just absolutely wonderful people who united around us as a family and made the whole process much easier. But at the same time, I had a remarkable wife. She did not prey on the fact that she had the disease. She treated it with total and utter contempt. But it did not stop her, of course, having a lot of low points where just overnight we had to be shipped off to a hospital or whatever. And it was a period of huge uncertainty. And it was the first time in my life where I would have people who had invited me to go to conferences losing their patience with me because I couldn't say whether I could come or not at the end of the day because I was living with so much uncertainty. So it was a pretty tough time, and I survived, and I guess I was stronger as a result of it.
Okay, excellent. That deserves an applaud, a big applaud, actually. Yes.
Okay, so I can add to that. So there are two types of difficulties I've faced. One is similar to the first one that Fraser mentioned, which is just being faced with politics inside your department. And I know that we all have faced those things, and they're very difficult. Often you really can't do anything about it. And what I always did is I just went around the things that I could, ignored what I could, and it's just picking your battles. I only took on the things that I absolutely had to, and just tried to overlook everything else, just, for my own sanity and also to try to keep peace as much as possible. The second type that I have faced has been when I had some research result, such as in the case of the Nelson Diversity Surveys, where I knew in advance that releasing those data was going to cause a lot of trouble in the community and it would get me attacked. And that takes a lot of courage to go forward with that. I mean, it would be so much easier to just say, I don't really need to do this. I don't really want to report these data fully. But whenever you have data like that that can help a huge community, you have an obligation to the community and an obligation to science to go forward with it. And there have been a number of times that I've had to do that. Another instance was when I identified a lot of inaccuracies in organic chemistry textbooks. I mean, I looked at it and I thought, oh God, do I really want to publish these? I'm going to make all the publishers hate me and all of the authors hate me. But I went right ahead and published it in the Journal of Chemical Education. And those are difficult decisions. And by the way, it turned out that the publishers were happy because they said, oh, great, this is something that we can put in the next edition of the textbooks. So they were just thinking about generating more sales for their textbooks. So it turned out not to be as bad as I thought it would be. But those are the two different types.
No, sorry. I thought you finished.
I am.
Oh, okay. It's your turn. Most difficult.
Well, I think the most difficult decision was that I had to realize I was not good enough to get an Olympic medal. And so in sports, so I had to change fields.
What sport were you?
Well, it would have been middle distance running.
How did you overcome it? What did you do?
Well, I'm shattered when I listen to Sir Fraser's story. I have really been awfully lucky. We have been healthy. We did science as a game. So I can illustrate. I mean, my major in college or in university was sports, and so was my wife. So we have the top degrees in competitive sports, and I got the first grant or fellowship together with my wife to go to the United States and study American sports to enrich the Swiss school system. I was going to be a high school teacher in sports and physics. That was the plan. And so we went to Berkeley. My wife studied modern dance and Japanese, and I studied officially baseball, volleyball, and basketball. And on the side, I did so much quantum mechanics that I was next hired by Bell Labs. And you see, it was like a game. The first thing I did at Bell Labs was to found another soccer league, which I had done already at Berkeley. And a few years later, I needed a lot of money, like $2 million at the time, a huge amount of money. And so I would go to our president and tell him if he couldn't spell out the money, I would take the job as a coach of the top football team in Zurich, and in 3 years I would make enough money to pay for the machine, and then I would come back. Of course, I got the money. I'm just trying to. I'm also working 18 hours a day, even now. I don't want to just make it seem too easy. But if I run into some problems in the lab, I played soccer on a league until 51. I would go out and forget it and change my mind. So, sorry, Fraser, I feel humiliated by your accounts.
I have a question for you.
I survived.
Yes, sir.
No, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So do you feel that being an athlete earlier in life has given you better health now?
As you will see tomorrow, not only that, but Nature published a picture of me practicing high jumping in 1956. And this happened in 2015. No, it has a lot to do with us being in good shape today.
Yeah.
That's I'm beyond 80, and I feel 60, I think.
That's why yesterday on the beach, the football was coming always in your direction, 3 times. Short. No, we're not asking secrets. No, okay. The difficult. No, we don't. I'm having science because the carnival dancers are waiting. But just short. I asked for the most difficult moment. What about the most happiest one? Just in 2 words.
You see, unless you are in a very publicity anxious organization, you have a major result about once in a decade. And there were like 4 moments when we really got it done.
Which is? Wait, what was that moment?
Well, the first was when we solved the structure in solution. The second one was when we solved the heavy problem in immune suppression with the first drug that prevented rejection of foreign tissue. The third one was to solve the prion protein, which did away with mad cow disease.
I think the most memorable moment was in the fall of 1988, and I had been encouraging some of my all-British students to make a donor acceptor catenane, as I described on the screen very briefly to the music, the singing of Edith Piaf. And I met resistance from my students, and there is a story here about diversity. A young lady came from Spain, Cristina Visser, and she actually got very sick coming from Madrid to Sheffield in the middle of a very cold winter. And she actually, within 10 days or so, made our first catenane, and it was just transformative. The synthesis was such that the crystals started to appear within 10 or 20 minutes on the side of the flask. And she relates how the next morning, having collected some of these crystals, she came in and they had disappeared. And I had taken them and I went down to London, and I know Tom Welton is in the audience, and I want to make this point. I took them to the best crystallographer, I think at that time, in the whole of the UK, if not in the whole of the world. And within hours or days, he solved the crystal structure, and we had this remarkable event where 2 rings were interlocked together. So it was a moment of great celebration. And I've not forgotten the role that was played by the crystallographer. And Tom will vouch for this. We are working very hard to make sure that he also gets credit for this big breakthrough. And we hope to be able to celebrate this at the opening of the new Department of Chemistry at Imperial College, where David was a professor of structural chemistry for many years, with a joint Stoddart-Williams lecture.
Short, in 2 or 3 words.
Thank you.
We're never short.
I honestly try to think about my darkest and happiest moments in my life, but apparently my life doesn't come in white and black. It's 50 grades of shades.
Oh.
So I would have to agree, very briefly, I would have to agree with him that whenever you solve a particularly difficult problem and then you see that the community is going to accept it, that's when I was really, really happy.
Well, I have to. If you realize the community does not accept it, then you know that you have done something important.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
eventually the community has to accept it. Eventually. It may take arguing, but eventually they do accept it. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
Well, realizing they didn't believe it was a big moment.
Initially, they don't believe it, but eventually they do. So it takes some arguing.
Yeah, but that's left over. That's
So I'm getting signs that the answers
My
are there.
experience.
So last question, the trick one, but just in 2 words. What do you prefer, to be young or at this age with a Nobel Prize on your back?
I would prefer to be young since I don't have a Nobel Prize.
I'm very happy to have received the Nobel Prize at 74 because you start the life of something like a royal family or whatever, and I wouldn't have welcomed it any earlier in my life.
As they say, it's always be better to be rich and young than poor and old. So
Short. I'm getting a hit there. They're waiting. The dancers. So just short.
I think it's okay as it is. I've now lived for 16 years as a Nobel Laureate, and it's been a great time. The most important thing is that getting the prize enabled me to continue working as if I were a young assistant professor,
Okay.
and trying every year to have a publishing record that would give me tenure at the respected university.
You saw that nobody said that my happiest moment in life was Nobel Prize, getting the Nobel Prize. I didn't hear that. Okay, last question, 2 words. What's the meaning of life? 2 words. This is the trickiest one and we're finished.
You have to be happy in whatever you do, otherwise time is lost.
Yes.
If you're happy with your job and in the end it fails, it's not time lost. If you are unhappy while you're doing your work and you fail, then it is really time lost.
Yeah, I agree. You have to be happy with what you're doing.
And?
I just repeat, just being happy every day. And I'm so lucky to go to a place, if I'm back in my laboratory, where I can be with young people between 18 and 32, practicing my hobby every day of my life. And like Kurt, it has given me the prize, this extra time, and I will never have to retire. I can just go on and on and on till I drop.
Andre?
I refer to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. The answer is 42.
We're asking, what is 42?
No, what I didn't hear his words.
Yeah, me too.
42.
Meaning?
Meaning of life. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe.
Oh, it's the guide.
Okay. So, the genius are immortal, but also human. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. The pleasure's mine.
So now, a very nice show, carnival type show, really Brazilian carnival. If you have never been in carnival time in Brazil, you'll have a chance to experience it.